Good evening or good morning, depending upon where you are tonight. Thank you for joining the GSA webinar, Navigating the Disruptions of COVID-19. I am Jody Shelton, the CEO of GSA, and it is our goal at GSA to remain at the forefront of providing essential business information on the semiconductor industry during this crisis. While you might typically be at happy hour on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, or asleep if you're in China or Taiwan at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, I think that all of us are changing our habits these days, so I hope you don't mind being on this call. Dr. Roawen Chen, the COO and SVP of Operations at Qualcomm, CDMA, has graciously agreed to share with GSA members his views on operational challenges he faces at Qualcomm and how they are managing the disruptions, whether the upstream supply chain issues or logistical impacts. Roawen is a highly respected leader in our industry, and he's always very open and transparent with his views and a great friend of the GSA. So Roawen, we really appreciate you joining us. To help facilitate the conversation, we'll be joined by Syed Alam, who is the Managing Director of Semiconductor Industry Global Lead at Accenture. And I would like to say that Accenture has done so much for the GSA, so we really appreciate all your support. And these two are going to have a conversation, and then what we're going to do is open it up to Q&A. So if you want to send in a question, you can send it in by pressing the Q&A button. And if you would like to ask a question, you can do a raise your hand. And I have to ask you to be patient with us. We're working through this for the first time and hope that we can work through the logistics. I think that is it from an introduction standpoint. So Roawen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Good evening, good morning, and thank everyone for being here today. And I think everyone knows that we are in a very uniquely challenged time. And but I personally also believe that is the time we must do all what we can to help each other through this one. And the semiconductor industry, even is a very big industry, is tend to have a very small community. And right now, at this moment, we are virtually bound together each other. So that's why we are calling this a webinar. And basically, we try to share our perspective, how to dealing with a situation like this. And by all means, there's no silver bullet. And nobody experienced a crisis like this in our life. And people say this is kind of life experience. I would say this is probably the once per 100 years we see this. And so what I'm doing here is I try to prepare some kind of a playbook. It's based on the last couple of weeks, our experience. And so we can share together and help each other. And please, and later after the presentation, feel free to provide your input. Because as I mentioned that we is try to help each other. It is the only way to make our industry even better after this. So let me start in my checklist. So the first thing we are doing in the last couple of weeks is we try to see if there's any supply chain disruption, and also what is the impact. And we also find out that first we go to our foundry, we go to our OSAT package house, and we find out, generally speaking, our vendors doing pretty well. And so the more and more so we find we have to go very upstream supply chain. So that means it's not necessary to look at the foundry and the OSAT. We have to go much deeper. And for example, we have to start to look at the equipment vendor, tool vendor, and even go deeper, try to see that any component, including consumer component, like a pro car, like a low board, like a cable, all this thing, and whether they have any supply disruption. And then you go deeper and deeper. what do we find out? In fact, there's so many places, and they might be a certain component is a single source somewhere on Earth in a different country. Some might be in Italy, some might be in California, some might be in New York, and we see the whole factory shut down, and then that is the first thing we try to understand whether there will be an impact. So when I talk about equipment, I'm not saying the semiconductor equipment might be just tester, ATE, or ACLT tool. So that is the first thing we are doing. The second thing is, I think starting from a couple of weeks ago, we also put all our engineering team into two different buckets. Okay, the first bucket we call essential people. That means is critical. Is critical people, they have to work on site, and the remaining people, they work from home. So you have to break down how many percentage of people you will consider that they are the essential people. And I think that the difficulty is trying to provide a balance. The first thing is we try to make sure that all the employees stay healthy. That's ultimately the most important thing. But we also want the other side, we also want to make sure the company is still running, and we want to make sure our productivity is still maintained the same. So I think at least based on our experience, and we can balance these two, I would say at least I would say if not 100%, we are probably still can keep 90% of productivity for the companies keep running. So that is something, of course, you need to figure out what is the best way to balance these two. And number three, we also, interestingly is, if you look at the epicenter of this of COVID-19, 2 months ago, they were starting from China. At that time, that people worry about the downstream supply chain, the customer supply chain. And we worry about what happened in China. We only focus on the supply chain player in China. And very quickly that the epicenter also outside of China, also including some of the countries in Asia, including Japan, Korea, and also Malaysia, Singapore, and so on. And then they moved to Europe, and particularly in Italy or German or Spain. Then right now everybody probably know that the biggest epicenter is in the United States and in our home ground. So I mean, New York particularly is pretty bad right now. So you can see that when we do our checklist, and it's also we have to follow where's the epicenter, where is have a biggest hit. And so that's also keep our busy, and because it's very dynamic nowadays. And number four, and we also see a lot of business shutdown and the quarantine enforced by the local government. It might be dependent on by the different city, different county, different state, or different country. So we also, mobilize our GA team, the government affairs team, and so they have a very frequent communication with the local government, and they try to understand what is the rule and the restriction, and then we try to figure out the solution, find the workaround, and so that is something. And every day is different because we just learned that in India, the whole country shut down 21 days. So how to deal with this? So something like this. And the last one is also we are closely monitor and all the logistic and the shipment impact. Particularly like the flight delay or cancellation. And so that is every morning, every afternoon, we do a 2 meeting and try to see where's any impact. And this kind of a thing, we create a dashboard, but is every hour is different. But so far, we found out if you also consider that the impact is not as big as people anticipated, and we see very little impact. Of course, there's always a couple days delay here and there, but generally speaking, I think we feel, at least at this moment, we feel comfortable in that regard. So this is kind of my opening remark. And I'm sure that everybody might have a different experience than we have. And Syed, do you have anything you want to add?
I think one of the things that you talked about in the beginning, understanding the overall supply chain, whenever we have supply disruptions, the first thought goes to looking at the supply situation at foundry partners or OSATs. But you talked about peeling the onion. What are you learning about your supply chain, that there are so many things, small things that could affect the supply situation? How you're going about learning about all of these, many layers of upstream and smaller components to the supply chain.
I think this kind of reminded me a couple of years ago. If you remember, there's a tsunami that hit Japan Island a couple of years ago, and you will see some of the supply chain vendor you probably never heard before, and they will become a single point of failure. And so, I mean, we start to learn all this, and sometimes it's something so small, maybe something, even particularly for engineering build, you tend to have a lot of single source here and there, and sometimes even some spatial component, maybe some even passive component. And so we still, I mean, I think as the time go by, we probably will find out more. And right now, everybody has some inventory, but if this situation will last another 1 or 2 months, and we probably will see even bigger shortage. But yeah, I just say typically when we manage the supply chain, we never go this deep, and this is kind of first time we have to really try to identify where is a choke point.
And maybe there's a learning from this to expand the supply chain planning or visibility horizon and the scope to include these kind of things going forward in the planning.
Yeah, but typically we are counting on our vendor like a foundry and OSAT to manage this one for us, right? Yeah. So this is
not a typical time. Yeah,
it's a difficult time. And I can give you one example that we are using one of the probe card company, and the probe card company their factory is in Italy. I would never figure out that in Italy we have a probe card factory, and of course right now they figure out a way, and we don't have any shortage. But it's without this crisis, we never know that Italy is also the part of the semiconductor ecosystem footprint. So it's just still learning.
If anybody who is attending have any questions, you can also please chime in through the Q&A box or raise your hand, and then happy to hear from anybody else also if they have any questions or comments.
So we do have a couple of questions that have been submitted through the Q&A feature. The first question is, consumer confidence is bound to decline for a while, which is likely to have downstream impact on demand in multiple market segments. Is there an outlook on what the impact might be 2 to 3 quarters from now, and what are these models based on?
Okay, this is kind of obvious question also. Okay, first we see China market already bounce back, and bounce back, and we feel from the supply side is if it probably at least a 90% recover. Even from the customer demand, I can only speaking from our side, but I think China is doing pretty okay, both demand and the supply. But right now the concern is Europe and the US, and so we'll see, because nobody know this crisis how long will last. So still wait and see. But whether 2 to 3 quarters, I think it's hard to tell at this moment.
Okay, it's Jessica again. Our next question is from Chris Traub, and he is a strategic executive. He's from Strategic Executive Search in Taipei. He's asking, how are you handling keeping the morale of your teams high in the midst of this disruption, particularly your leadership team? Your leaders are needing to keep people motivated and productive at a time of great distress and disruption in their organizations.
I think for anybody working, by the way, I'm speaking from Qualcomm. This is supposedly this is more for the general question. But if you say this is not the intent to answer Qualcomm question, but let me answer it this way. If anybody know Qualcomm in the last couple of years, every year we have a different type of crisis. So if there's any company, we every day deal with the crisis management. I think that everybody in Qualcomm is well trained. Number one. And also we also learn from in the past. Every time there is for example 2008 financial crisis or the big crisis like this, or kind of the whole world meltdown, we always, our golden principle is always out invest. Is in fact this will be the time we even double down our investment. And so when the crisis behind us, when they recover, and we will be better positioned. So I don't think that is a morale issue. In fact, we we still keep hiring, and in fact we are more aggressive with hiring people. So I think that is the only way you can motivate people, right?
All right, another question. When do you expect this demand supply imbalance will last until? Sorry, did I say that clearly? When do you expect this demand supply imbalance will last until?
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I mean, you probably read the news. Okay, I think it's supply demand balance. I would say before coronavirus, particular 5G or before this, and the whole industry, if you follow the news, then is supply is less than demand. So demand is semiconductors supposedly by entering 2020, everybody has a very bullish view about what is demand will look like. So our issue is try to figure out how to get more supply to meet our demand. So with coronavirus happen, and the equation is kind of moving the other way, is to balance supply and demand might not be supply constrained business, might become a demand constrained business. So it's just a different type of issue. But of course, we prefer more supply constrained business. But the environment, and for the at least next couple of months, I think I don't think the supply is the biggest issue.
And Ron, if I can add, one of the things is from the industry perspective, we are also seeing the demand mix is also changing over across the industry. There has been increased demand for cloud right now and associated chips with that. So there could be short-term disruption for demand in certain areas, but those at a macro industry level being offset by the increased demand for cloud. So this is a very dynamic environment in this demand.
Yeah, and also this is a good point. In fact, you also see a certain segment, the business is very strong. And if you look at what is a new phenomenon happen, and all the school shut down, and all the students, they have to go home, and they kind of all become online class. And so you will see like a student notebook is selling very well. You also see Wi-Fi, hotspot, and all those kind of devices selling very well because suddenly everybody has to connect and work from home. In fact, in a way that we are 5G provider, and in the long term that the people will require more and more bandwidth to connect to your home. So a certain segment, like a video conference or the software tool, or even content provider, even Amazon. So I would say certain segment, a certain business model they probably well suited for the future even after this crisis. So so we'll see. Some winner, some loser, but I would say overall, people we all recognize one thing is people probably will consume more semiconductor.
So Ron, you mentioned e-learning. At my home, I don't know about e-learning. Definitely video game usage has gone up.
Yes.
Okay, so our next question is, are you looking at geographic diversification of supply chains in the future based on this crisis?
In fact, this not only for the supply chain diversification, one thing also benefit Qualcomm as being a global company is our engineering footprint is also globally. So so in a sense is we also got some benefit from that, because in a certain region you have like an epicenter moving from one country to the other country, and you look at even in California, even in the United States, every state they are going to reach to their peak at a different cadence, different time. So so we have a people at a different country, different state, and it also helping us. So one of the reasons we can kind of maintain the high productivity is also because of this. And in terms of supply chain, we always Qualcomm is always very diversified, and so as much as we can, of course, there's certain constraint. For example, leading edge foundry is a lot of it's TSMC, and so I think about this whole industry have a similar issue. But otherwise, I would say supply chain, we will do diversification, and most of the critical product with a second source. And going forward, I only think we can only do as much as we can. And so always we'll have a certain cluster in a certain region of the world. And some of the product will probably, some of the product or some of the even the engineering tool to enable like some of the equipment vendor and like a tester, and we probably need to be more multi-sourcing, and also make sure that all the factory not reside in the same country, same location.
Okay, before I ask the next question, I just wanted to encourage our attendees to raise their hand, and that feature is should be at the bottom of their screen where they have their controls of Q&A and chat. So if you'd like to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask a live question and join the discussion. In the meantime, I will ask the next question, which is, do you see any project delay or product development slowdown due to the current situation, such as work from home, travel ban, etc.?
As I just mentioned, that so far our productivity is not much impact, and one of the benefit we have, first, we're a fabless company, so we really don't have a large fab or factory, so they help us. And so working from home, they will have a certain disadvantage. You don't have a FaceTime. But just like today, for the video conference, we still can see each other. So you also save a lot of time, because we typically have so many business trips, international travel, and in fact, you spend more time in the home base. So I will argue that productivity overall, I don't think it is compromised that much.
Ron, one thing I wanted to also ask, you mentioned the lot of airlines, disruptions and all of those things. And mostly in the industry, we use airline freight. Are you looking at also, or have you considered alternative mode of transportation besides airlines? Has that come into discussion?
No, in fact, airline, we're not talking about a person,
I'm talking about the goods. Yeah, talking about the goods. Yeah.
I think right now we are not constrained by that.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay, next question is, how do you anticipate this disruption causing an impact to the 5G deployment worldwide?
Just like I say, China is fully recovered, so we don't see anything different. I mean, of course, compared with 2 months ago, right now the sign is more positive, and I think the concern more for the short term is more consumer spending, and that is more concern than the 5G deployment.
Okay, as there have been various analysts pointing to dramatic drop in smartphone shipments in 2020. Since smartphones are very big silicon consumers, that could change the tight capacity situation at foundries. How do you see this playing out?
It's hard for me to answer that question, right? Because right now we are still too early to see this, and frankly, probably nobody know. If, as I mentioned to you, and just not long ago, the whole industry is still supply constraint. So when you have a demand much higher than what is the total wafer capacity can provide to us, and so right now, where is the balance point? Like demand is a short-term drop, and we believe it's going to be. We believe we're going to see a big drop, but very quick recovery. So I forgot to mention one thing when I talking about our kind of checklist, and I think it's also very important. We have to be also very mindful as well. Is we are so focused on how to deal with the crisis, coronavirus, or the outbreak, or the disruption, but in fact, we also spend a lot of time to thinking about how do we exit from this, and so likely we're going to see a quick deep drop, quick recovery. So we also need to prepare a snapback. And it might be after the crisis done, and the demand just like another tsunami, and suddenly the consumer spending like go crazy. So at the same time, we need to try to manage how to make sure the supply is continue to support our business. But you inevitably you're gonna see a dip. But I will also argue this is not like a structurally. This crisis is not going to structurally change anything. Remember, I using the analogy like a tsunami, or I think like a Hurricane Katrina. If you remember, this is kind of 100 times scale bigger than that Katrina. But you just need to deal with this one and everything. And then I can even argue after this crisis, and the people will consume even more. Not only to repair this one, but I just say for human nature, when you stay at your home, you hunker down for many, many months. When you really get out, you're kind of a home prison. You probably only thing you are going to do is spending. So I really don't feel that we should only look at the down. I should also look at the up when everything behind us. It could be very quick.
Yeah, good point. And Rowan, on the earlier point also, mobile phones obviously drive a lot of silicon in the ecosystem, but now the industry is so diversified. We have silicon requirements coming into manufacturing of foundry partners from different angles. Demands coming out of the automotive sector. We talked about cloud sector, so it's very diversified. I think it's hard to say that one sector going down could have an impact on our capacity equation.
Yeah, and also I want to make sure that this, the purpose we have this one is really not. I try to share with us what is the measurement we can do, and to make sure the supply is not going to disrupt, and try to reduce the impact. So the intent for this conversation is not try to. I'm not a CFO of Qualcomm, and this is not the time that. People ask me about what are you thinking about 5G, or what are you thinking about the business. I think that is not, we lose the purpose of why we are doing this.
Yeah. Good point.
Okay, next question is, can you talk a bit about 5G launch timing due to this demand shock and consumer behavior changes?
What is the launch time?
Launch time?
Oh,
the 5G launch, sorry.
Oh. It's still, I mean, again, I as I mentioned, I think I already mentioned to you, we don't see impact on our productivity. So I can only speaking from that angle. So we're still planning as before the crisis. There's no difference. But again, I mentioned this webinar is not trying to answer anything to do with the 5G, anything to do with smartphone, and anything to do with Qualcomm. I think we want to make this more general.
Yeah, I think your point is we want to discuss how do we navigate the disruptions. Obviously, you cannot comment on the 5G phone launch and those kind of things. That's not the main purpose. Yeah.
Okay, this next question, let me know if it's along those lines that you were just speaking of, but with consumers' jobs being affected by this crisis, do you see an impact on consumer demand for high-end electronics for this year?
And again, this is not the, I don't think I'm in the position to answer that question.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you see IC component inventory buildup in the industry? What will be your recommendation for company inventory strategy at this moment? Keep it lean or increase inventory for future demand?
I think just like I mentioned, right, we are not talking about, this is not like a 2008 financial crisis. That crisis you have lasts very long. The impact is for a couple of years for people fully recover. This one is going to be will be a very deep drop but quick recovery. That's our reading. So I mean, we spend also a lot of time try to prepare ourselves when we after this crisis. What do we need to do? One thing we need to do is after the crisis and the consumer demand will probably quickly shooting very, very high. So we are talking about instead of a typical seasonal profile like this way, it might be this and go this way. So I don't think the inventory is in everybody's mind. It is just my personal view. Is remember I have to look at if the crisis lasts for a couple months. And I also need to thinking about how about after this crisis, how Qualcomm is prepared to make sure that when the consumer spending return to the normal or even beyond the seasonal pattern, what do we need to do? So that is I want to people thinking about not only this is crisis management. Crisis management also had to prepare what is we after this crisis, what do we learn and what do we need to prepare ourselves.
Rowan, I think you mentioned a very interesting point and a very important point also is this. I think we don't want to get sucked into the downside. Obviously, we need to manage through these times, but don't lose the sight of the upside that's coming. Yeah. You don't want to be now, okay, you did a great job of managing the downside, and when the upside comes, you're not prepared. I think that's a very important point.
Okay, I thought I would maybe bring up if there's anyone, which I know there are several people on from either China or Taiwan, maybe you guys could chime in, especially from the IC companies in China, maybe how you're seeing the recovery over there. And again, Qualcomm making the statement last week, I believe that the phone activations are on par with where they were last year in China, which is so unbelievable that it would recover that quickly. So maybe if there's anyone from China, and then I would ask also if there's anyone from Taiwan. We're used to being in Taiwan once a month or once every 3 weeks, probably for Rowan. So maybe if we could hear from one of you all as well. I think you just do a raise your hand and take yourself off mute. So not to pick on anybody, but maybe Nikki Lou, if you're on, maybe you can add your perspective as well.
Nikki, I saw Nick. Nikki.
All right, here we go. Allowed to talk?
Yep.
I still see him on mute.
Yep, Nikki, you have to accept to be unmuted.
I'm muted. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. This is my first time using Zoom, but I'm now focused on my business with Zoom. That's exactly what Rowan said. Some segment is pretty hard now. Uh, specifically for Taiwan, I have the same situation, just like what Rowan said. We face some changes in the lifestyle. Although Taiwan controlled that epidemic much better than I thought, I can still have lunch and in the restaurants, and people all wear the masks, but the hospitalization, hospital, everything look like still functional very well. That's surprising me, and maybe the first few times I praised the government here, because we are so close to China, so many people transport in between, but the situation be controlled. At least most of the people can stay living as just normally. One thing I think I saw that in semiconductor business we are much better than the other industry, like transportation and many others. And in the supply chain, I also share the same views with the Rowan. We just had a surprise that one of the probe card company in United States, because California shut down all the operations for that, and we don't have that probe card. And, I every day just chat with TSMC guys. I think that's very important for Taiwanese maintain our normal situation. And I think we're in TSMC, there's one employee at this disease, but only 7 people being isolated because that lady was not so so close to all the activities. That triggers not only the TSMC, all the factory here, including fabless company, and doing much more strict checkup when the people enter the company. For example, we right now set up the reception desk outside the company, so everyone will have fill the form and do the temperature check and make sure they bring the masks, and also use alcohol to dry clean the hands, and also check all the travel history. And everything okay, then we let them come into the company. So during the raining season, we also spend money to get extra set up outside the company. Maybe that's very useful for everybody. And so anyway, I think Taiwan is lucky, and semiconductor industry is okay because TSMC, UMC, everybody, including ASE, everyone, a factory in Taiwan still running as usual, but very cautious and keep our operation to serve everybody. And of course, the demand side is the worry, and many opinions think the second quarter is the most difficult one. We see the first quarter is about 90% lower than what we expect, but not too much. Some of the other company may have better situation. So second quarter will be pretty cautious for us. And I don't know whether these things will be bouncing back after the third quarter. But based on the SARS experience, and also the whole world is so alerted to the situation, I think the third quarter should be better than the second quarter. Okay, that's my opinion from Taiwan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nikki. I also noticed Hygiene is also here. Hygiene? I don't know. Okay.
Sorry, who is it? I can reach out.
Jody, you're on mute, so we can hear you speaking again.
Okay, so Hyjin from SMIC, if you're on, we'd love to hear from you as well. And if not, Jessica, you can go ahead and ask another question.
Gotcha. Okay, another question. What is the current logistics impact, if any, on the distribution channels and contract manufacturers? Is there a slowdown in distribution's ability to move supply and contract manufacturing capacity?
I don't see much impact. Some impact, but it's manageable.
Ron, one thing I wanted to ask, what changes or process-wise things that you have done that even after we are over with this situation, you would like to continue? You say, okay, this was a good idea. I mean, even when after this, I would like to continue with this practice.
Work from home.
I know you would say that based on your travels.
No, I just say I say the humankind is running one of the biggest experiment in the thousands year history. And suddenly you have such a high percentage of people and all work from home, study from home, and once you get used to, there is some profound impact on the way we are doing things. It's very difficult to predict the future, but I'm sure that we will see for the next generation, and particularly, we are semiconductor guy. We are going to make sure that when is after this crisis, they probably will have some new industry, new player, and will benefit from this. Will create another maybe another Amazon, another Facebook, another something. So who knows? And so I'm for example, some people are talking with me about AR, the virtual reality, and you can also argue that what is the use case people used to say? I say, well, right now one of the big use cases is when you coronavirus, if you have a VR or AR, and you're thinking that not only we are doing Zoom to do the video conference, and you are going to go to virtual world, distant teaching, and you can talk with your doctor, you can communicate with your peer. And so I would say that there might be something is going to be very big. We don't know. The only thing I'm certain is they are going to consume more semiconductor. It's good for us.
Okay, maybe we have time for one last question, or if there's anyone who wants to do a raise your hand to have any comments. And if not, Jessica will take one more question and then we'll wrap up here.
Okay, the next question is, many of the semi research analysts are forecasting or revising major semi players earning down for 2020, 2021, 2022, and not expecting the earning to be back at 2018 levels in the next 3 years. Why is that? What's the implication on the overall semi industry trend?
I'm not in the position to answer that question, but what I can say is this. And we, the semiconductor citizen, the one thing we learned is we need to be very humble about our capability to predict what is going to happen next. And I still vividly remember that in the 2008 financial crisis, people think the sky is falling down. And if you go back history, in the 2008 was a financial crisis. 2009, you look at everybody, every semiconductor company, and how good your life was. So I don't think that when you are in the middle of a crisis, frankly, we're all blind. We lost our capability to predict the future, particularly for semiconductor guy.
Right. And I will say that that we have a couple more webinars coming up that we'll be more focused on, how quickly we're going to get out of this downturn and what some of the predictions are. We've got a call with Mark Edelstone from Morgan Stanley this time next Friday. And then we have a call on April 6th with Handel Jones, who's going to go over his predictions. And then on Monday, we have a call with Lip Bhutan, talking to portfolio, like he would be talking to his portfolio companies and what advice. So Rowan and Syed, thank you so much for doing this. And thank you to all of our participants. And if you need anything from us, you can always email me and I'll get back to you. And we'll hope to answer your questions to get you guys all the information that you need to make decisions for the eventual solution to this crisis. So thank you guys and happy Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stay healthy.
Yes, stay healthy. We need all the brain power. Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye.